Alright, this is Unity 101 Open Office Hours. And today, I'll be here, and so will Gavin.
Hello.
Hey. Okay, so we have some questions already piling in, so let's get through them. Did you want to address Ben's on video? Gav, is that what you said earlier, or did you already address that?
No, I already addressed that.
Okay. Wolf, I have a bug where the explosions that I instantiate don't ever destroy themselves, and they just stick around in my hierarchy. What could that be caused by?
Probably not calling destroy in the right place.
Yeah, let me go ahead and fire up Unity.
Ben has gone.
I guess he doesn't like us very much.
He literally just went.
Okay, so the question was, why are the explosion prefabs not destroyed? Now, if we look at the code that instantiates the explosion prefabs, I believe that's player barrel. If we look at that, prefab is instantiate, blah, blah, blah. So it instantiates a projectile, and the projectile on that is set to a script with player projectile. Or did he say explosions? Okay.
He said explosions, but I don't know whether he means all of his explosions or just the ones that are created by the player or the turret or the... He didn't specify.
Hold on, as Visual Studio starts to load. Or tries to load. Maybe it'll load. Oh, popped up on another monitor. Okay. So if we look at here, we instantiate an explosion on the player projectile. So if we go ahead and look at our player's barrel, or sorry, not that, we're looking for our prefabs, our player projectile, I believe it was called, player projectile, and it has an explosion FX set as the prefab. And if you look at the explosion FX, now it should be destroyed if you look at it. So were you referring to the projectile or are you referring to the actual explosion? See, the player makes the player projectiles, and then the explosions get created when the player projectiles become destroyed.
For a start, which particle system are you referring to, Wolf? This one or the old-fashioned one? Because we did two different ones.
Okay, it doesn't look like my explosion FX are being destroyed either. Gav?
What?
Question panel from Scott.
Yeah, I couldn't find one. I couldn't find... Because in the old-fashioned... go to your other explosion. The flame explosion. Now that one, you've got the checkbox on each of these for what...
Auto-destruct.
Yeah, auto destruct. There doesn't appear to be one on the new particle system. So like like Primax just posted in BuzzNet, you need to do a...
Okay, we'll address that. I mean, do you want to address that next week then? Because I'm really against kind of adding any
Just
code at
address
this
it
point.
now.
Well, so what people are suggesting is to create a new script whose update method checks to see if the particle system is alive, and if it is not destroying itself, then what you would do is you would then attach that script onto the instantiated explosion.
Go on then.
Well, I mean, the problem is that we already have people who left because they're not...
That's their fault.
Hey, Lance. Alright, so if I wanted to go ahead and add a particle auto-destruct script, it would look something like this.
Yeah, Moose nailed it.
That's really not it at all. It's I don't even know how to spell particle.
That's right.
So I'm going to add a new script called particle destruct. Mono behavior and public void update. If not, particle system is live. Destroy game object. Okay, so that's the extent of the script you need to add. To attach it to your explosions, you would have to say var go equals game object cast on instantiate go add component particle destruct. And that would really be all you need to do.
Could you not just append the dot add component to the preceding line and not have to instantiate it out the?
Well, you could, but it
like
looks
that.
kind of ugly.
I was just double checking it would work actually.
Yeah,
I thought it would, but I didn't know if there was anything Unity related that would make it go, no, we've got to do it afterwards. Because I love that one that if you try and use new on a mono, it tells you to put it on the next line or something. It's got the bizarrest error message.
Alrighty, there's the particle destruct script. And so quickly, before you guys copy it down, I'm going to test this real quick.
Yeah,
although there's
sure
no reason why this shouldn't work. And indeed it does. So add component actually adds a new script at runtime. Well, yeah, add component adds a script or any other component. Keep in mind that a script is really just a component.
And vice versa. Or at least a component is made up of one to many scripts. Even the transform is a component. And it has X, Y, Z positions and X, Y, Z rotations and scales. Those are its sub. In fact, can you bring up the actual code for the transform?
For the transform?
Or for any of the built-in ones? Can you actually go and look at the...
Well, I can look at a mono behavior. So mono behavior inherits from behavior, and behavior inherits from component. And this is a component. Okay, so hopefully that answered your question, Wolf. So it wasn't a bug, it was our fault. Justin, so this is always in reference to the script attached to the object. Yes, that's an important thing to keep in mind. Whenever I'm in a script and I type in this dot, so if you are familiar with object-oriented languages, you might know of the this keyword. The this keyword typically is an object that is a reference to the object you are currently working under. And in this particular case, this dot applies to the current script component. It does not apply to the game object, even though there are some aliases out to game object properties, such as .transform. This .transform is a property on the mono behavior, but it simply delegates to the game object that the mono behavior is attached to. That means when you do destroy this, you are not destroying the game object, you are destroying the script that's attached to the game object. Game object.
That is a key thing to get, a key difference to really get into your head.
Right.
Not difference, a key point. This is very specifically this, literally the code file that you've written this in. It's referring to itself. Because, where is it, the other half of that question? Was that Justin's question that you read about?
Yeah, when you're inside a game object and you want to get transform, you don't have to call game object.transform, right? I'm just saying transform position one. Right. That's because in Unity, the transform property, this is the mono behavior.transform, which is an alias to game object.transform.
In exactly the same way as int is an alias for int32.
So these two
The key thing
properties
is
are the same.
Where you put transform.position will give you the transform.position. Because it gets confusing if you've got a game object that's parented to another game object. They've got different transforms.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily, it's you just have to be careful when you're dealing with multiple transforms in the same prefab or, same game object. No, this is the trouble. There's too many keywords in Unity. I'm trying to find a way of saying it that isn't a specific thing in Unity.
Oh, all right. Well, I hope that answers your question, Justin. My ship does not shoot. I'm not sure where I went wrong. Do you have the player barrel script attached to your player's barrel? For the person having issues with, okay. Does your player barrel script, do you have the projectile property set to your player projectile? Actually, it might be just faster jumping over to your screen. Do you mind if we do so?
Who are you talking to?
Sean. Ryan, no, we're
just
talking
that Ryan's
to
answering you. We're talking to Sean.
Sean, yeah.
And that Ryan, because it's not Ryan Mac, Ryan Trummell. Are you Ray Show? Yeah. You sent me a PM. It was one of the PMs that I found just before class. The title of which was something along the lines of I have an error. Oh, that's right. No, it was Unity is telling me I'm missing a using. What does this mean? Essentially, that was the question. means you're missing a using. If you want to ask the specifics of it in the questions panel.
Well, we primarily just need to know what line. Then we can probably give you the using that you're missing. Well, what line is it throwing an error on? Are my turrets shooting to the side now? Oops. No? Okay, so Sean, can we switch to your screen? We still haven't gotten a response for that. Okay, so we will... I guess move on until we get...
Oh no, he's just replied.
Okay. Alright, could you, let's see here. Projectile, player projectile. Can you jump into your player barrel script? Oop, I found it. Can anybody else see the error in the code?
No, I can still see Unity telling him it's loading the thing.
Well, it was in the inspector window and I already saw the error.
All right, up a date.
Oh, you gave it away. I was going to have
17.
I was going to have everybody.
Well, it appeared on screen, and it's an error. I spotted it because it's a spelling error.
Check your line 17. You didn't quite spell update right.
Yeah, that one.
Yep, it happens.
No, it doesn't.
All right, let's just
never happens.
let's just see if it works first.
You can ignore that line endings problem. It doesn't matter which answer you provide to that. Actually, you can explain exactly what that problem is, Nelson, in a minute.
I don't want to get into it.
Well, you wanted to make this about answering, and that is one of those things that comes up in Unity all the time. Oh, massive, big bombs,
Cannonballs.
Da, 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 da. Oh no. How the hell does Dam Busters go? I can't remember.
Alrighty, so let's come back. Alrighty.
Ryan, if iGame state cannot be found, that means you're missing a call to bloody-bloody.abstracts, or whatever namespace you put your iGame state in, which should be an abstract.
Yeah, iGame state is, I believe it's going to be something like assetscode.abstract. Okay, save states and score tracking, I'll save that to the end of the class. And then just to reiterate, yes, add component adds a new component to your game object. Wolf, my turrets are not shooting to the side. I have no idea what you did.
He hasn't set his rotator Y to the right direction.
Ah.
He's just found that himself.
Ryan, did you resolve your issue with your using statements? Keep in mind that if you're using Visual Studio, so for example, if I take this off, if you're using if you're using ReSharper will give you this little pop-up, which is very handy. But if you're just using Visual Studio and you click inside, okay, well, for people who are using Visual Studio but not ReSharper, if you click on the thing that isn't being resolved, there's a little tooltip that pops up right here that you can click on, and it'll suggest importing in the namespace. But keep in mind, to reference this type, you need to import the namespace that that type lives in. To find out what namespace that type lives in, you can go over to the interface definition and see what namespace it's wrapped around on the definition. So were you able to import the right namespace? Alrighty.
Wolf. That last thing you mentioned about getting the explosions moving with the level, that is a setting, again, in the particle system. There's an explosion for inheriting velocity, and you need that set to 1, or whatever amount of velocity you want to inherit. So if you want the explosions to look like they're obviously going slower, then you need to set inherit velocity to 0.5 or 0. Something, or if you want them to suddenly go flying off through space, you could set it to 10, and it simply multiplies the velocity of the thing that instantiates it by that number, and treats that as the initial velocity for the particle system.
My risers don't seem to rise. Alright, do you mind if we jump into your screen, Troy? Watson. That's an awesome last name. Alrighty, so you say they don't rise, but they rotate. So if you go into update activating, don't rise, but they rotate. Your lerping looks fine.
Have you actually set your inactive and active positions to anything other than 0?
Ryan, sure. But if you check inside the Unity editor, are they perhaps being overridden in some way?
No, oh yeah, I suppose that would work, wouldn't it? Yeah, just pick the turret, any turret that's in the level. Yeah, position 0 and 1.
And that is correct, right? Pretty sure it's correct.
I think it's 0 and 1 for us. Well, play the game and see what happens. Not this scratch screen, you'll get errors. Yes, you are now. I can see what's happening. They're actually moving in the wrong axis. It's the local rotation thing. If you actually go back into code, and in that line in activating where you're doing the rising, if you change line 55, remove the 0 comma at the beginning of that vector 3 and put it at the end, or
Oh,
yeah.
hey, stop. Put the 0 back. Put the 0 back.
Why?
Okay, okay, now bring your mouse cursor, or your keyboard cursor 2 characters to the right.
All right, and then hit Control Shift Alt left.
Yep. Now hit Control Shift Alt and then left. So Control Shift Alt all at once and then left. Hit OK.
There we go.
Nice.
Same thing. Yeah, now save that. F6. I'm glad you brought that up because that will confuse things.
Nope.
Nope.
Z.
Wrong way. So it needs to go into the Z. Okay, sorry, my fault. Go back over and
then Control Shift Alt and then right twice.
Then right twice. That will work this time.
And save it out and you should be good.
You can just hit F6 instead of going up to that button all the time, by the way.
Nice.
Sweet.
Sorry, I'm really like to point out resharper shortcuts if I notice you have it installed. Control Shift Alt's a really nice one though. You can move it, move code left and right, up and down. It's really nice. Okay, Ryan, you ready for us to jump into you? Not you, Rymac. Trammel. Okay, so, wow, that sounds very terrifying. I'm actually legitimately scared. It sounds like an alien from the movie Alien is eating your microphone with its claws. Anyway, so if you go ahead and save out this file and do a build, and so I can see the exact error. I know you posted the error before, but I just wanted to just really quickly see the error again. Okay, so IEnumerable. IEnumerable is in the namespace collections.
System.collections.generic.
That's the non-generic version, so it's just in system collections. So then system.collections. Now, if you don't have a tool like Visual Studio, just collections, yeah. If you don't have a tool like Visual Studio ReSharper, finding these using statements will be a bit of a pain. So I really want to point out, actually, you know what, I'm going to be a bit of a, Okay, I'm going to be a bit of a pain right here, Ryan. Because you're not using a tool that's... oh, you don't want to...
Good.
Because you're not using a tool that will give you the namespaces of certain things. The best way to find out, so if you go ahead and delete sure, literally, if you go to Google and type in of type space MSDN, that's the fastest, and I'm not trying to be, patronizing or anything,
Um,
but
there's sorry, line 31, while it's there, you appear to have the word sure just randomly typed in
yeah, you're probably gonna.
halfway along it.
But if you just typed in of type and MSDN, I mean, I don't know what your internet history is, so I probably should do it on my screen. What you'll get is the first result is enumerable.oftype, and if you look at it, I have it up on my screen, but you guys can't see this. If you look at it, the recording can though. There's a namespace on the top of the documentation for enumerable.oftype, and the namespace listed there is system.link.
I don't
So,
think he's listening to you. He just keeps highlighting that line of code.
yeah, so if you want to go ahead and add system.link as a using, and again, it is going to be a bit of a pain. See, this isn't a difficulty that I've ever had because I've always used Visual Studio and ReSharper, so I've never really had to hunt down using statements before. But, oh, it's LINQ and then capital S, capital L. Okay, so those errors should go away now. Once you add your curly back in. You nuked a curly, it looks like. Oop, no. Close. You're going to have to delete that curly on line 8 and move it above your doohickey thing. There you go. Yep. So now if you do a rebuild, those particular errors should go away. And you are left with one last error. Sweet. So you... Oh, right. That's because we didn't return... we didn't return an IEnumerable on line 44. We returned an IEnumerator. So if you change the return type on line 44 to an IEnumerator, that should make that compilation error go away.
IEN.
And if you build one more time, you should be golden. Nice. Alrighty. So, yeah. Did you have any...
Nelson, did you see what Deist you just posted in BuzzNet?
Yeah, let me look at it real fast. Oh, nice. So it looks like there's now a it's Control-Alt-Space in MonoDevelop to bring in an autocomplete list that includes all namespaces. All right, looks like your code says the variable blah 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 isn't being used. If you click off for a second.
It's quite possible that that was a reference to manager in one of the classes, because I know there's at least one where we
Actually
brought it through but didn't use it.
what I think happened was on line 34, you have we originally wrote the code out just like that, but then we aliased out some parts of those expressions into the two variables on line 31, 32. So you can actually delete lines 31, 32, and you'll be fine, because the code on line 34 does the exact same thing, just in a more compressed way. I broke it out on video just to make things make a little bit more sense. Alternatively,
Yeah, you see, I mean, with the reason that lines 31 and 32 are there, for instance, line 31, line 34 should now say for each var entity in all monobehaviors of type iGame entity. In fact, you can just replace that whole collide with .gameObject.getComponents.blah with var entity in all behaviors that implement iGame entity. And now you won't have that warning anymore because they're being used.
right.
But do you see why what that problem, sort of what had happened there? I can hear that you're speaking, but I can't hear what you're saying, right? Oh, and you're typing into the chat window now. Okay, I'll mute that then. It's obviously just your computer's mic.
Oh, he's typing in the chat? Okay. Yeah, Control-Alt-Space, it brings up an autocomplete window that includes all types from all namespaces. But anyway, does that clear up your questions? Alrighty. Actually, if it's going to be a minute typing out that question, it's been just about an hour, so I think I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and step outside real fast. Oh, hold on. The question just came in.
We just will add one from Wolf, and he's having problems with the inheriting velocity. It may be that isn't doing what I thought it does, but it seems to be for me.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a guy who's saying that if you know XNA, it's pretty easy to drop that code into Unity, and I'm wondering if it's true because the college teaches it. Not really. And
Depends on what code you've used in XNA. It depends on, because unit, for instance, you'll have things in XNA like a texture 2D type and a vector 3 type and a vector 2, all these different types, but they won't necessarily work in exactly the same way as they do in Unity's implementations of them.
Well, the most
And pure C# code is transferable. And the thing is, XNA has is set up so that it has a similar structure in terms of you have a I can't even remember what it's called now, a render method, I think, instead of on GUI. But
well,
again, if any, well, yeah, I mean, the short answer is that it's not going to be easy.
okay. XNA is a framework.
Yeah,
Unity
it's not a game engine.
is a game engine. XNA, all of your rendering must be done immediate mode, meaning that you will have to write render methods that loop through materials on meshes, apply them, and do all that stuff. Unity, on the other hand, is designed... Okay, think about it this way. XNA is designed for you to instruct the graphics card what to draw every frame. Unity does that for you. To interact with Unity, you write scripts that tell Unity how to describe a scene to your graphics card. It's fundamentally different. That being said, you will typically end up with a game engine if you write in XNA for long enough. You're not going to be writing just straight up XNA invocations for very long because that'll become unwieldy. Inevitably, you're going to create a game engine out of your code with XNA that will probably behave more or less like Unity if you go with a component-based design. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that every game written in XNA will behave the exact same way, will have the same game objects and the same sort of structure, because that's not a requirement. XNA is just a framework. It's a framework for rendering things. It's a framework that contains a content pipeline. It's just a framework. Unity is a fully fledged game engine. It has
It's kind of
editor and all that
and
stuff.
that's why I was kind of umming and ahhing, because to an extent you're going to have large chunks of code that you can transfer across, but it's not a cut and paste
Well, sure.
answer.
Any pure C# code can be brought across, obviously.
Yeah. I can see why somebody might say that, but really and truly, it's not as easy as that.
Yeah, I would not make that generalization whatsoever.
In the same way as that, you can transliterate C++ into C#, and quite a lot of the code will actually need virtually no changes, the individual lines of code.
Yeah, as far as mathematical expressions go.
Mathematical expressions, also quite a lot of the syntax, to be honest, depending on how you've written it, could remain identical or just involve the replacement of things like auto with var and
Sure.
and things. But that would leave you doing things like making get methods and set methods and doing lots of non-optimal C# things purely because of the way you've written the code for C++. And it's the same sort of thing, only more of a problem, really.
I know that, but if C++ can be used in Unreal, why can't C# be used in Unity if it's the same principle?
That's
makes
not what
no
we were
sense.
saying. Pure C# stuff could be used, but you're probably not going to want the same functionality in Unity.
It's different things. There is no way to do immediate mode rendering in Unity, for example. You cannot clear out the back buffer and render a polygon pixel by pixel in Unity. It's a fundamentally different thing. Yes, it's the same language, but the way in which you interact with it is completely different. So notice how on this, look at the screen and code you're looking at. What do you see? You see things like manager.start coroutine. Well, that's a method that's in Unity and specific to Unity. There is no XNA start coroutine. Look at gameObject.set active recursively. XNA does not have any built-in game object hierarchy. There is no set active recursively method. Look at transform.translate. XNA has no concept of game objects. It's just a framework. You have to build the concept of a game object on top of XNA. And it's not going to translate one-to-one, period. There's no way for that to happen. That's impossible. Because XNA is considerably lower level than Unity. Yes, it's the same language, but just because it's the same language doesn't mean that the same objects exist, doesn't mean that the same classes exist, and doesn't mean that the same methods exist. So there's no way that you can just drop XNA code into Unity. That's just how it is. Now, that isn't to say that learning C# won't help you with both, because that's definitely true. If you know C# very well, you should be able to get around Unity decently, and you should be able to get around XNA decently. But when it comes to actually code for code, line for line, character for character, you're not going to see a lot of interop between those two platforms. Same syntax, different methods and functions. Yeah, it's the same syntax. It's still C#. You still have curly braces and semicolons. But there's different methods, and there's different principles. Like I said, XNA is immediate mode rendering, meaning that every frame you have to write code that literally instructs the GPU to render a polygon in XNA. In Unity, that bit is handled for you. I'm not suggesting that one is better than the other right now. They both have their purposes.
Well, this is the thing. They're not the same. You're not comparing like for like. You're comparing a game engine with a design principle. XNA is a design principle. XNA is you've got the Microsoft.xna. whatever namespaces, which gives you some of the functionality. really and truly, I mean, it's just an order to your code that has certain methods for loading content and things, implicit within it and already set up for you. But other than that, that's all it is.
Well, it's not very opinionated either, though. It's just a framework that allows you to render things to the screen and get user input and make sounds. That's it.
The equivalent to X and A within Unity would be mono behavior. The X and A game one you've got is actually, it's like mono behavior. You've got start and the equivalents to start and update and the rendering method, which is Nelson says does a completely different thing, but it's still, you separate out. But other than that, the rest of the Unity engine, the ability to move things and rotate them and determine 2 different points in 3D space, none of that's there in X and A. I do want to go back to this thing that Wolf's still going on about the velocity change. For one, it will work on the ones that are set off by the turrets, I believe, because they're moving, but currently won't work on the one from the player. What you'd have to do is go and get the velocity of your background scrolling and just give it that as a start velocity. I can't remember what we called it. I think we called it background scroll speed or something.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, though. Okay, and we're back. So we did get a question to go over the recursive method that I wrote earlier for finding the turret. And I believe that script was located somewhere in the code base. There we go. Okay, so the getTurret method, what it does is it takes a GameObject parent and it recursively tries to find a component through the by recursively looping through the parent hierarchy, and the component it looks for is called turret. And that sentence was horribly constructed, unlike this method, which is very straightforward. So the method starts off as taking a parameter called GameObject. It then tries to identify if that GameObject has a component called turret. If it does, it simply returns out the component. Otherwise, it tries to see if the parent has a parent. So does the GameObject that we passed in have a parent GameObject? Well, if it does, then it recursively calls itself, saying return getTurret. Now, recursion isn't something that I really, want to spend a whole lot of time talking about. But the point is that what we have here is a method that repeatedly calls itself, but it has 2 exit conditions. All recursive methods need exit conditions. Otherwise, like what you said, it will continuously invoke itself over and over and over again until you get a Stack Overflow exception. At least in when the JIT compiler doesn't tail optimize the recursive call. So we have 2 exit conditions. If it finds a turret component on the GameObject that was passed in as a parameter, then it simply says return component. That is the exit condition number 1. If it reaches a object that does not have a parent, we have another exit condition. In this particular case, we simply throw a new invalid operation exception, which is a little bit nicer than throwing a Stack Overflow exception or a null reference exception. Otherwise, the recursive branch simply reinvokes itself, telling it to find the turret given the object that was passed in's parent. So does that sort of make sense? It doesn't cause an infinite loop because it has 2 exit conditions. Either it throws a new invalid operation exception or it returns the component. Now keep in mind that in C#, all recursive methods In C#, all recursive methods that do not have an exit condition will cause an stack overflow exception unless you are compiling against the x86 JIT compiler on Microsoft's implementation of .NET. That's because the x86 JIT compiler on Microsoft's implementation of .NET contains what's called a tail recursive optimization, which rewrites this method to not be a recursive method, but rewrites it to be a loop. However, in most cases, it's pretty much guaranteed that if you have a recursive method that never exits, you will get a Stack Overflow exception.
Yes. Sadly, the computer hasn't been invented that has an infinite amount of memory.
One day.
Or certainly, not publicly anyway.
Yeah.
Probably one underneath a mountain somewhere.
Yep. Isn't the object always a turret? No. See, this method is used to get the turret of a child element on the turret. So if we look at...
You mean the parent of a child element?
Something like that. So if I load up my Scratch scene and look at level 1, and look at a turret, see, this script is attached to the turret collider, which is any of the children of the turret. See, notice how the turret collider is attached to the frame, the rotator, the riser. Yeah, the frame, the rotator, and the riser. But the actual turret script is attached to the parentmost object of that prefab.
When he says parent, Wolf, I mean the parent of a turret in this case, or the parent of that turret that he's got highlighted at the moment is the level, or strictly speaking, the level's transform. Parent is a function of transform, so it's why you have to go looking for the transforms. But do you understand generally what's meant in hierarchical terms? You've got parents and grandparents and children and grandchildren, and it's the relative position in the hierarchy. In exactly the same way as it is in a family tree. That's obviously where the nomenclature comes from. And Stephen, that brings up a good point about your whole question over inherited velocity. That may well be down to it being part of the physics engine and not liking that at all. So there is probably a way around it, but I would have to go digging to try and find it. Sorry, I'm trying to find something else in my inbox at the moment. 8th of the 9th. 9th of the 8th. Rare show. Did you or did you not send a PM to me before Wednesday, July the 11th at noon? If not, that is your answer right there. No, I do not want an email from...
Okay, so quickly to wrap up Wolf's question so we can get off camera. So are the frame, riser, and rotator all part of the turret? As in that code, it checks to see if something is a turret. What I mean is component. This method recurses up the hierarchy. All it does is says, are you a turret? If not, is your parent a turret? If not, is your parent's parent a turret? Maybe that's true. So if it is, then return the parent's turret. It goes up the hierarchy until it finds a turret, and then it returns that object to the caller. Otherwise, if it cannot find a turret object, it throws a new invalid operation exception. So that's all it does. I don't know any other way to explain
Yeah. Go and check if you're still confused on the whole issue of recursion and these. In the XNA 101, I can't remember which volume, I think it must be volume 2, Knowledge Review 7, the infamous Knowledge Review 7, which is a directed acyclic graph, which is essentially a hierarchical system. Check out the way that Buzz and Logan code that up for a good explanation of hierarchies and so forth. Florum, you don't need to get involved in that.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just wrap up. So yeah, I don't see any more questions, so I think that will end today's class. And to all your future people, we will see you next week.
Goodbye to the future people.